The thunder rolled across the vast expanse of the Montana Territory as Archer Irving pulled his hat lower, squinting against the driving rain. It was 1878, and the unforgiving wilderness showed no mercy to those who wandered its reaches, especially not during a storm like this. His stallion, Renegade, tossed his head nervously as lightning split the darkening sky, but Archer pressed on, following a trail few would notice leading up into the craggy hills ahead. The experienced cowboy had been tracking a small band of cattle rustlers for 2 days when the storm hit, forcing him to abandon the pursuit temporarily. Now, as he sought shelter among the rocky outcroppings, something caught his eye, a flicker of light where no light should be, tucked away in a small hollow between 2 ridges. Dismounting cautiously, Archer tied Renegade to a sturdy pine and drew his Colt revolver. Years of surviving in these territories had taught him that unexpected encounters rarely ended well. The rain pelted his duster as he moved silently toward the faint glow, which he now recognized as the struggling remains of a small campfire partially sheltered by an overhanging rock. When he rounded the final boulder, he stopped short. A woman sat huddled beside the dying embers, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, a tattered blanket pulled over her shoulders. She jerked her head up at his approach, terror flashing across her face as she scrambled backward. "Stay away," she warned, her voice surprisingly steady despite the fear in her eyes. She raised a small derringer with trembling hands. Archer slowly holstered his gun and raised his hands. "I mean no harm, madam," he said, his voice deliberately gentle. "Just seeking shelter from this storm, same as you, I reckon." Lightning illuminated her face, young, perhaps 25, with striking features and eyes that held both fear and determination. Her clothing, though muddy and torn in places, suggested she wasn't from the frontier. "Too fine, too tailored. You're alone out here?" he asked, though the answer seemed obvious. She hesitated, the small pistol still aimed at his chest. "My stagecoach was attacked yesterday. I ran. I'm the only one who got away." Her voice caught on the last words. Archer nodded slowly, understanding dawning. The Blackwater gang had been raiding stages along the northern route. "I'm Archer Irving. I run cattle about 20 miles south of here." "Amelia Northcott," she replied after a moment's hesitation. A particularly violent crack of thunder made them both start, and the already precarious fire sputtered further in a gust of wind. "Miss Northcott," Archer said, "that fire won't last the night, and this storm's only getting worse." He gestured to the inadequate overhang. "You've got no real shelter here." "I'm aware of my circumstances, Mr. Irving," she replied, a flash of spirit breaking through her exhaustion. Despite everything, Archer found himself smiling slightly. "May I approach? I've got supplies on my horse that might help us both weather this night more comfortably." After a long moment, she lowered the derringer. "Very well." Archer retrieved his saddlebags and bedroll from Renegade, bringing the horse closer to the overhang for additional protection. Working efficiently, he built up the fire with dry wood from his saddlebags, then set up a more substantial shelter using his oilskin ground cover and some rope. As the flames grew stronger, he noticed Amelia watching his every move, the derringer now resting in her lap, but still within easy reach. "Smart woman. You heading to Silverton?" he asked, offering her a strip of jerky from his provisions. She accepted it hesitantly. "Yes, I have an uncle there." After a small bite, she added, "Or at least I hope I still do. It's been many years since we've corresponded." "Silverton's a 4-day ride from here, assuming good weather." Archer poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "Those men who attacked your stage, they'll be looking for survivors." Fear flashed in her eyes again, but she lifted her chin. "I'm aware of that too." Outside, the storm raged on, rain turning to hail that clattered against the rocks. Archer added another stick to the fire and settled himself on the opposite side, giving her space. "You should try to rest, Miss Northcott," he said quietly. "You're safe. I'll guard you through the night." Something in his tone must have reassured her, for she studied him closely before nodding. "Thank you, Mr. Irving," she said simply, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. As she drifted into an exhausted sleep, Archer remained vigilant, his rifle across his lap and his eyes scanning the darkness beyond their small haven. There was something about this woman, her courage in the face of terror, her dignity despite her circumstances, that stirred something in him he thought long buried. Dawn broke with lingering clouds but no rain. Archer had allowed himself only brief periods of rest, always remaining alert to any sound that might indicate danger. When Amelia awakened, she seemed momentarily confused before remembering where she was and who was with her. "You truly did stand guard all night," she observed, a note of surprise in her voice. Archer shrugged. "Gave my word, didn't I?" He busied himself preparing a simple breakfast of hardtack and jerky. "If you don't mind my asking, what brings a lady like yourself out to these parts?" "Silverton's not exactly Boston or Philadelphia." She accepted the food with a small smile. "St. Louis, actually, and you're right, Silverton is quite different." She hesitated before continuing. "My father died 6 months ago. There were financial difficulties I wasn't aware of. When the creditors came, there was nothing left." "I'm sorry to hear that," Archer said sincerely. "My Uncle Edgar is my only remaining family. I wrote to him, and he sent funds for my journey." She looked down at her torn dress ruefully. "Everything I owned was in my trunk on that stagecoach." Archer nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Northcott, it seems we're heading in the same direction. Silverton's on my way home. If you'd allow it, I'd be honored to escort you there." Amelia regarded him cautiously. "You've already been most kind, Mr. Irving, but I wouldn't want to impose further." "It's no imposition. These hills aren't safe for anyone traveling alone, let alone a woman unaccustomed to the territory." He gestured toward the open country. "Those men who attacked your coach, they're part of a gang that's been terrorizing this area for months. I've been tracking them myself." "You're not just a rancher, then?" she asked shrewdly. Archer's lips twitched. "Let's just say I have some experience with men of their kind." He didn't elaborate on his years as a deputy marshal before settling down to ranching. Some stories weren't meant for morning conversation. After a moment's consideration, Amelia nodded. "I accept your offer, Mr. Irving. Thank you." They broke camp efficiently, with Archer showing Amelia how to mount behind him on Renegade. The powerful horse snorted at the additional weight but seemed otherwise untroubled. "We'll need to stop in Clearwater to get you a horse," Archer explained as they set off. "It's a small settlement about a day's ride from here." Amelia adjusted her position awkwardly, clearly unaccustomed to riding this way. "I've never ridden astride before," she admitted. "Only side saddle, and not since I was a girl." "You might want to hold on," Archer suggested as they descended a steep slope. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hands lightly at his waist. The day warmed as they traveled, the landscape opening up before them in a breathtaking panorama of rugged hills and valleys. Archer kept them moving at a steady pace, occasionally pointing out landmarks or explaining the territories they passed through. Amelia proved to be a quick study and an interested listener, asking intelligent questions about the land and its inhabitants. "The Crow Nation considers those mountains sacred," he explained, gesturing toward a distant range. "They've been pushed further north in recent years, but these lands still hold their stories." "You speak as if you respect them," Amelia observed. "I do." Archer's voice was matter of fact. Most folks out here see only savages, but they understand this land in ways we never will. They stopped at midday by a clear stream to rest Renegade and eat a small meal. Archer noticed Amelia wincing as she dismounted. Riding muscles are different from walking ones, he said, offering her his canteen. It'll get easier. She took a drink of water. I hope so. I fear I'm not making a very good impression as a frontier woman. On the contrary, Archer replied, most city folk would have fallen apart after what you've been through. You're doing just fine. A flush of color touched her cheeks at the compliment. Thank you. Though I suspect just fine is rather generous. As they continued their journey, Archer found himself increasingly impressed by Amelia's resilience. Despite her obvious discomfort and the trauma she'd recently endured, she maintained her composure and even her sense of humor. By late afternoon, when Clearwater came into view in the valley below them, he found himself reluctant for this part of their journey to end. Clearwater was little more than a collection of buildings serving the surrounding ranches and mines, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and a livery stable. As they rode down the main street, Archer felt Amelia tense behind him. It's smaller than I expected, she murmured. Most places out here are, he replied. But the hotel's clean, and Mrs. Hollister serves a decent meal. They dismounted in front of the livery, drawing curious glances from the few townsfolk on the street. Archer helped Amelia down, noticing her stiffness and the way she straightened her torn and dirty dress in a futile attempt to appear presentable. Let me handle this, he said quietly, leading Renegade toward the stable entrance. An hour later, Amelia sat in a small but clean room at the Clearwater Hotel, marveling at the transformation in her circumstances. Mr. Irving Archer had spoken briefly with the hotel's proprietress, Mrs. Hollister, a stout woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Whatever he'd said had resulted in not only a room for the night, but also a hot bath, clean clothing borrowed from Mrs. Hollister's daughter, and the promise of a proper meal. The borrowed dress was simple but well made, if a bit large, and Amelia felt almost human again after washing away the dirt and fear of the past 2 days. She'd never considered herself particularly attached to creature comforts, but the simple pleasure of being clean made her eyes sting with grateful tears. A knock at the door startled her. Miss Northcott, it's Archer Irving. She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, his own appearance considerably improved. He'd clearly bathed as well, his dark hair still damp, and had changed into a clean shirt and trousers. Without the grime of the trail, she noticed for the first time how handsome he was, tall and broad-shouldered, with intelligent eyes and strong features weathered by sun and wind. Mrs. Hollister says supper will be ready in about 20 minutes, he informed her, then hesitated. I've also arranged for some essentials for our journey. The general store didn't have much in the way of ladies' clothing, but there are some basics: riding skirt, shirts, a coat for the cool evenings. Amelia blinked in surprise. That's very thoughtful, but I couldn't possibly consider it a loan, he interrupted gently. You can settle accounts with your uncle once we reach Silverton. She wanted to refuse to maintain her independence despite her circumstances, but practicality won out. Thank you, she said instead. I'm in your debt, Mr. Irving. Archer, please, he replied with a slight smile. And there's no debt. Anyone would do the same. But as he escorted her downstairs to the small dining room, Amelia suspected that wasn't true at all. In the few short hours she'd known him, Archer Irving had shown more consideration and respect than most men of her acquaintance ever had. Supper was simple, but hearty venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Mrs. Hollister joined them briefly, her curiosity about Amelia barely contained behind a veneer of frontier hospitality. "Not many young ladies travel these parts alone," she observed, pouring coffee. "Especially not ones with your accent." "I'm on my way to join my uncle in Silverton," Amelia explained politely, sensing the woman's unasked questions. "Mr. Irving has kindly offered to escort me after my stagecoach encountered difficulties." Mrs. Hollister's eyebrows rose. "Difficulties, is it? Well, you're fortunate Archer found you. Most men riding these hills aren't the sort a lady wants to meet." After she bustled away, Archer leaned forward. "I took the liberty of purchasing a horse for our journey," he said quietly. "Nothing fancy, but a steady mare with a smooth gait. We can leave at first light if you're rested enough." "That would be fine," Amelia replied, then hesitated. "Though I should warn you, my riding skills are rudimentary at best." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "We'll manage. It's about 3 days to Silverton from here, mostly easy terrain." As they finished their meal, the door to the dining room swung open, and 3 men entered, their spurs jingling against the wooden floor. Something in Archer's expression made Amelia turn to look at them more closely. The men were trail-worn and rough-looking, with the easy confidence of those accustomed to intimidating others. The tallest, a man with a scar running down one cheek, surveyed the room before his gaze landed on Amelia. A slow smile spread across his face. "Well now," he drawled, nudging his companions, "looks like Clearwater just got a whole lot prettier." Archer's hand moved subtly to rest near his holstered revolver. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice pleasant but carrying a warning edge. "The stew's good tonight." The scarred man's eyes flicked to Archer, narrowing slightly. "Irving," he acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't know you were in these parts. Just passing through." Archer's posture remained relaxed, but Amelia sensed the tension in him. "You boys been working the North Trail?" Something unspoken passed between the men before the scarred one shrugged. "Here and there. Work's where you find it." His gaze returned to Amelia with uncomfortable intensity. "Madam," Archer said quietly, "I believe we're finished here, shall we?" Grateful for the suggestion, Amelia rose, keeping her eyes lowered as Archer guided her past the men and toward the staircase. She could feel their stares following them until they reached the upper landing. "Who were they?" she asked once they were alone in the hallway. Archer's expression was grim. "Trouble. The tall one's Jake Harmon. He rides with the Blackwater gang sometimes." Amelia's breath caught. "The same men who attacked my stagecoach, possibly." He glanced back down the stairs. "I'm not certain, but we should leave earlier than planned." "Can you be ready by dawn, of course?" She straightened her shoulders, determined not to show fear. "Should we be concerned for tonight?" Archer considered the question. "I don't think so. Even Harmon wouldn't cause trouble in Mrs. Hollister's establishment. She's got a shotgun and knows how to use it." He smiled slightly. "But I'll be in the room across from yours just in case." Impulsively, Amelia touched his arm. "Thank you, Archer. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me yesterday." Something flickered in his eyes, a warmth that made her heart beat faster. "Get some rest, Amelia," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be a long day." True to his word, Archer was waiting outside her door when Amelia emerged in the pre-dawn light, dressed in her new riding skirt and carrying a small bundle of her meager possessions. They breakfasted quickly on coffee and biscuits left by Mrs. Hollister, then slipped out to the livery stable. 2 horses waited, already saddled Renegade and a dappled gray mare that regarded Amelia with gentle brown eyes. "This is Willow," Archer said, helping Amelia mount. "She's even-tempered and sure-footed. Just keep a light hand on the reins and she'll follow my lead." As they rode out of Clearwater, the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten. Archer set a brisk pace, frequently checking behind them until the town disappeared from view. Only then did he allow the horses to slow to a more comfortable rhythm. "I saw no sign of Harmon or his companions," he said, riding alongside her. "But it's best we put some distance between us and Clearwater regardless." Amelia nodded, concentrating on maintaining her seat. The riding skirt made a tremendous difference, allowing her to sit properly astride, and Willow was indeed as gentle as promised. Still, after only an hour, muscles she didn't know she possessed began to protest. "We'll stop more frequently today," Archer assured her, noticing her discomfort. "Your body needs time to adjust." By midday, they had covered a respectable distance, following a trail that wound through increasingly rugged country. When they stopped to rest near a small stream, Amelia dismounted gingerly, trying not to wince. "It gets easier," Archer promised, handing her a strip of jerky. "By the time we reach Silverton, you'll be riding like you were born to it." She smiled despite her discomfort. "I doubt that very much, but I appreciate the encouragement." As they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, Amelia found herself studying her companion. There was more to Archer Irving than he revealed. She sensed it in his watchfulness, in the way he carried himself, in his obvious familiarity with men like Jake Harmon. "You said you're a rancher," she ventured, "but you seem to know these territories and the people in them very well." Archer took a long drink from his canteen before answering. "I've been many things in my life, Amelia. Ranching's just the most recent. And before that." He met her eyes, considering how much to share. "I rode with the marshals for a while after the war, tracked men who needed finding." "A lawman," she said, understanding dawning. "That explains how you knew those men in Clearwater." "Former lawman," he corrected. "I hung up that life 3 years ago. Too many graves dug, too many friends buried." His voice held an edge of old pain. "Decided I'd rather build something than just hunt men down." "Your ranch," he nodded. 4,000 acres along Silver Creek. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. 60 head of cattle, a few horses I'm breeding, a cabin that needs more work than I have time for." A smile softened his features. "But it's home." "It sounds wonderful," Amelia said sincerely. "What about you?" Archer asked as they prepared to continue their journey. "What awaits you in Silverton beyond your uncle?" Amelia hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure," she admitted. "Uncle Edgar owns an assay office there. In his letters he mentioned perhaps training me to keep his books. It's not the life I imagined, but it's a new beginning," Archer finished for her. "Yes," she agreed, mounting Willow with growing confidence. "A new beginning." They traveled steadily through the afternoon, the landscape changing around them as they climbed higher into the foothills. Archer pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territories, his deep knowledge of the land evident in every observation. As the sun began to dip toward the western horizon, he led them to a sheltered clearing beside a narrow creek. "We'll camp here tonight," he decided, helping Amelia dismount. "There's good water and enough grazing for the horses." Working together, they established a comfortable camp. Archer showed Amelia how to gather firewood and build a proper fire, while he tended to the horses and set up a rudimentary shelter using canvas from his saddlebags. As darkness fell, they shared a simple meal of beans, hardtack, and coffee. "Tell me about St. Louis," Archer requested as they sat by the fire. "It's been many years since I've seen a proper city." Amelia smiled, memories of home both sweet and painful. "It's beautiful in its way, grand buildings, gaslights along the streets, steamboats coming and going on the Mississippi." She traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. "My father was a merchant, importing goods from Europe and the East. We had a house in Lafayette Square, not ostentatious but comfortable. You must miss it." Parts of it, she acknowledged, but St. Louis had its share of ugliness too: poverty, corruption, the constant striving for position and wealth. She looked up at the vast star-filled sky above them. Out here, everything feels clearer somehow, as if all the things that seemed so important there don't matter quite so much under this sky. Archer regarded her thoughtfully. Most city folk never adjust to the territories. They see only the hardships, not the beauty. Perhaps I'm not as much a city girl as I appear, Amelia replied with a small smile. My mother died when I was young, and my father often took me with him on his business travels. I've seen more of the country than most women my age. And yet, this is still a far cry from anything you've known before. She nodded, sobering. Yes, but necessity is a powerful motivator. When you have no choices left, you learn to adapt. Archer added another stick to the fire. We should reach Thompson's Creek by tomorrow evening. It's a small trading post, not much to look at, but the owner, Sam Thompson, is a good man. We can resupply there before the final stretch to Silverton. As the fire burned lower, Amelia found herself growing drowsy. The physical exertion of the day's ride combined with the peaceful sounds of the wilderness around them lulled her toward sleep. You should rest, Archer said gently. Take the shelter. I'll keep watch. You need rest too, she protested. You can't stay awake every night. I'll sleep light, he assured her. Old habits die hard. Too exhausted to argue further, Amelia retreated to the simple shelter. As she drifted toward sleep, she realized that, for the first time since the stagecoach attack, she felt truly safe. There was something about Archer Irving's quiet competence, his unassuming strength, that inspired complete trust, a rare quality in a world where she'd learned to be wary of men's motives. She awoke to the soft sounds of morning birds calling, water bubbling in the creek, the gentle nickering of horses. Opening her eyes, she saw Archer crouched by a small fire, coffee already brewing in a battered pot. Good morning, he greeted her. Sleep well. Better than I expected, she admitted, emerging from the shelter and smoothing her hair. Though I fear I'm developing an appreciation for real beds. His lips quirked in amusement. Civilization has its advantages. He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. We should reach Thompson's Creek by sundown if we make good time. The second day's ride proved easier than the first. Amelia's muscles, while still protesting, had begun to adapt to the saddle, and her confidence in handling Willow grew with each passing hour. The landscape continued to change as they traveled, becoming more dramatic: deep valleys, rushing streams, and forested slopes leading up to rocky outcroppings. This is beautiful country, Amelia observed during one of their brief stops. Archer nodded in agreement. Some of the best in the territories. The mining companies haven't torn it up too badly yet. You don't approve of the mines. It's not that simple. He surveyed the vista before them. The mines bring people, commerce, opportunities. But they also bring destruction, greed, conflict with the native tribes. He shrugged. Progress comes at a cost, always has. As they resumed their journey, Amelia found herself studying Archer's profile against the backdrop of the rugged landscape. He seemed to belong here in a way she couldn't quite articulate, as if he and this wild country were cut from the same cloth, weathered by the same elements. It was late afternoon when Archer suddenly raised his hand, signaling for them to stop. He sat motionless in the saddle, listening intently, his expression focused. "What is it?" Amelia whispered. "Riders," he replied quietly, "coming up the trail behind us." Fear flickered through her. "The men from Clearwater, can't tell yet." Archer's eyes scanned their surroundings. "There's a stand of pines about a quarter-mile ahead. We'll wait there where we have better cover." They urged their horses forward at a faster pace, reaching the pine grove quickly. Archer guided them off the trail and into the trees, where they dismounted and secured the horses. "Stay here with Willow," he instructed, drawing his rifle from its scabbard. "Keep low and quiet." Heart pounding, Amelia watched as he moved silently to the edge of the trees, positioning himself where he could observe the trail without being easily spotted. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited, the only sounds the soft breathing of the horses and the whisper of wind through the pines. Finally, she heard it too, the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats, the jingle of tack. 3 riders appeared on the trail below, moving at a steady pace. Even from this distance, she recognized Jake Harmon's tall figure leading the group. Archer returned to her side, his expression grim. "Harmon and his friends," he confirmed in a low voice. "They're following our trail." "How?" Amelia asked, fear tightening her throat. "It's not hard if you know what to look for. 2 horses, one carrying a woman." He glanced at the sky, which had begun to cloud over. "We need to lose them before nightfall." Instead of returning to the trail, Archer led them deeper into the pines, following a barely visible game path that wound upward along a steep slope. The going was slow and difficult, with branches catching at their clothing and hidden roots threatening to trip the horses. "Where are we going?" Amelia asked when they paused to let the horses rest. "There's an old trapper's cabin about 2 miles from here," Archer explained, checking Renegade's girth strap. "Off any established trail. We'll be safer there for the night." "How do you know about it?" A shadow crossed his face. "Tracked a man there once years ago. Not a pleasant memory, but useful knowledge now." They continued their difficult journey as daylight began to fade. The clouds thickened overhead, promising rain, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Just as the first drops began to fall, a small cabin came into view, nestled against a rocky outcropping and partially concealed by tall pines. The cabin was crude but solid, built of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney at one end. Archer approached cautiously, rifle ready, but the place was deserted as he'd expected. "It's not much," he said as they led the horses to a lean-to shelter at the side of the cabin, "but it's dry and defensible." Inside, the cabin consisted of a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough wooden table, and a narrow cot built into one wall. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, but the roof appeared sound, and the chimney was clear. While Archer tended to the horses, Amelia set about making the place more habitable, sweeping out the worst of the dust with a bundle of pine branches and gathering kindling for a fire. By the time Archer returned, she had a small blaze going in the fireplace, casting a warm glow throughout the cabin. "Impressive," he commented, setting down his saddlebags. "You adapt quickly. Necessity, remember?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Will they find us here?" Archer hung his wet coat near the fire. "Not likely. The rain will wash away our tracks, and this place isn't on any map. We should be safe enough." He unpacked their meager supplies, setting out jerky, hardtack, and a tin of peaches he'd been saving for a special occasion. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the rain pattering on the roof and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. "What will you do once you've delivered me safely to Silverton?" Amelia asked eventually. Archer considered the question. "Head back to my ranch." "I've been gone longer than planned already." He hesitated. "Though I might stay in Silverton a day or two, it's been a while since I've enjoyed the luxuries of a proper town." "I'd like to repay your kindness somehow," Amelia said earnestly. "Perhaps my uncle—" "There's nothing to repay," he interrupted gently. "Having your company on the trail has been payment enough." Their eyes met across the small fire, and something unspoken passed between them, an awareness, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Amelia felt her cheeks warm and she looked away first. "You should take the cot," Archer said after a moment. "I'll be comfortable enough by the fire." Despite her protests, he insisted, and eventually Amelia relented, settling onto the narrow bed while Archer arranged his bedroll near the hearth. The rain continued to fall, a soothing rhythm that soon lulled her toward sleep. She was drifting on the edge of consciousness when Archer spoke again, his voice so soft she almost missed it. "I'm glad I found you in those hills, Amelia Northcott." Before she could respond, exhaustion claimed her, and she slipped into a deep, dreamless sleep. The storm passed during the night, leaving behind a world washed clean and glistening in the early morning light. Amelia awoke to find Archer already up, preparing a simple breakfast from their supplies. The domestic scene struck her with unexpected poignancy, this capable, complex man moving with easy efficiency in the small cabin, his presence somehow making it feel like a home rather than a temporary shelter. "Good morning," she greeted him, sitting up on the cot. "How long until we reach Thompson's Creek? If we leave within the hour, we should arrive by early afternoon." He handed her a cup of coffee. "I checked for signs of Harmon and his men at first light. No trace of them anywhere near here." Relief washed through her. "That's good news." "Indeed," Archer agreed. "But I'd still prefer to reach Thompson's as soon as possible. Sam will know if there's been any unusual activity in the area." They set out as planned, the going easier now that the rain had passed. The forest eventually gave way to more open country, and by midday, they could see smoke rising from chimneys in the distance. Thompson's Creek proved to be little more than a collection of buildings serving as a supply point for trappers, prospectors, and travelers moving through the territory. The trading post itself was the largest structure, a long, low building with a wide porch and windows secured with iron bars. As they approached, a tall, bearded man emerged from the trading post, a shotgun held casually in one hand. He squinted at them, then broke into a broad grin. "Archer Irving." "You old wolf," he called. "Didn't expect to see you in these parts again." Archer dismounted, smiling. "Sam Thompson. Still guarding your empire, I see." The two men clasped hands warmly, years of friendship evident in the gesture. "And who might this lovely lady be?" Sam asked, turning curious eyes toward Amelia. "Miss Amelia Northcott," Archer introduced her, helping her dismount. "I'm escorting her to Silverton to join her uncle." Sam's bushy eyebrows rose slightly. "Well now, any friend of Archer's is welcome here. Come in, come in. Martha will be delighted to have another woman to talk to. Gets mighty tired of my conversation, I reckon." Inside, the trading post was surprisingly well-stocked, shelves lined with canned goods, tools, clothing, and other necessities. A pot-bellied stove dominated one corner, around which several wooden chairs were arranged. A counter ran along the back wall, behind which stood a diminutive woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. "Martha, look who the wind blew in," Sam announced. Martha Thompson studied them over her spectacles before breaking into a surprisingly girlish smile. "Archer Irving, as I live and breathe, and with a lady friend no less. Wonders never cease." Introductions were made again, and within minutes, Martha had whisked Amelia away to the family's living quarters behind the store, promising hot water for washing and a chance to put herself to rights. Archer watched them go with amusement before turning back to Sam. "We need to talk," he said, his voice lowered. "Had some trouble on the trail." Sam's expression grew serious. "Figured as much. You're not one for social calls." He reached beneath the counter and produced a bottle and 2 glasses. "Come on back to the office." In the small room behind the main store, Sam poured them each a measure of whiskey and settled into a creaking chair. "Let's hear it." Archer explained the situation finding Amelia after her stagecoach was attacked, their encounter with Jake Harmon in Clearwater, and their suspicion that Harmon and his companions were following them. Sam listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing grimmer with each detail. When Archer finished, he took a long swallow of whiskey before speaking. The Blackwater gang's been getting bolder. 2 stagecoaches hit in the past month, several homesteads raided further north. He shook his head. Sheriff in Silverton's good for nothing but collecting taxes and keeping drunks locked up on Saturday nights. Any strangers passed through here recently? Archer asked. Not in the last few days. Sam refilled their glasses. But there's another matter you should know about. Edgar Northcott died 3 weeks ago. Archer's head snapped up. What? Pneumonia took him fast, buried him behind the church in Silverton. Sam's eyes were sympathetic. If the lady's traveling to join him. She has no idea, Archer said softly. And now no destination, no family, no resources. Damn shame, Sam muttered. What will you do? Archer stared into his glass, possibilities running through his mind. I'm not sure yet, need to think on it. He looked up. But I'd be obliged if you wouldn't mention this to Miss Northcott just yet. I should be the one to tell her, and preferably not until we're somewhere more private than a trading post. Sam nodded in understanding. Your business, not mine. You're welcome to stay the night here. Got a cabin out back for travelers. Martha would appreciate the company. Thanks, Sam. We'll leave for Silverton first thing tomorrow. When Amelia rejoined them an hour later, Archer was struck by the transformation. She'd washed her hair and changed into a simple but becoming dress that Martha had provided. There was color in her cheeks and a lightness to her step that he hadn't seen before. Mrs. Thompson has been extraordinarily kind, she told him as they walked toward the guest cabin. She even found a dress that fits me reasonably well. Martha's a good woman, Archer agreed, careful to keep his expression neutral despite the weight of what he now knew. She and Sam have been fixtures in this territory for 20 years. The guest cabin was small but clean, with 2 narrow beds, a table, and a pot-bellied stove similar to the one in the trading post. Through the window, Archer could see the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. It's beautiful here, Amelia observed, following his gaze. So different from anything I've known before, yet somehow it already feels familiar. She turned to him with a small smile. Perhaps that's just the company. The simple statement caught him off guard, stirring emotions he'd long suppressed. In the days they'd traveled together, Amelia Northcott had shown courage, adaptability, and an openness to this harsh land that few Easterners ever managed. She'd faced danger without faltering and discomfort without complaint, and now she would face heartbreak. The thought twisted in his gut. Archer, she prompted when he remained silent. Is something wrong? He forced a smile. Just tired from the trail. Sam says Martha's cooking up a proper dinner for us, something to look forward to after days of jerky and hardtack. Dinner proved to be a lively affair. Sam was a natural storyteller, regaling them with tales of the early days of Thompson's Creek, when bears were as common as customers, and the winters so harsh they'd had to tunnel through snow to reach the woodpile. Martha, despite her diminutive size, matched her husband's story for story, her quick wit and sharp observations keeping them all laughing. For a few hours, Archer was able to push aside his concern about what awaited Amelia in Silverton. Watching her in this warm, convivial setting, her face animated as she shared stories of her own travels with her father, he felt a growing certainty that whatever happened next, he wouldn't simply deliver her to Silverton and ride away. The evening ended with Martha producing an ancient fiddle, which Sam played with surprising skill while Martha sang in a clear, sweet voice that belied her years. As the music filled the small dining room, Archer found his gaze continually drawn to Amelia the way firelight gilded her profile, how her eyes reflected the dancing flames, the gentle curve of her smile as she listened to the music. When they finally retired to the guest cabin, a comfortable silence settled between them. Amelia moved about the small space, preparing for sleep, while Archer stoked the stove against the night's chill. "They're wonderful people," she said at length, sitting on the edge of her bed. "It's hard to imagine building a life so far from everything familiar, yet they've clearly thrived here." "The territories breed a special kind of person," Archer replied. "Or perhaps they reveal what was already there, beneath the veneer of civilization." "And what has it revealed in you, I wonder?" Amelia's question was soft, almost to herself. Archer looked up, meeting her curious gaze. "Nothing very remarkable, I'm afraid. Just a man trying to find his place in a changing world." "I think you underestimate yourself." She held his gaze steadily. "Few men would have done what you've done for a stranger, risking your safety, delaying your return home, asking nothing in return." Uncomfortable with her praise, Archer busied himself with arranging his bedroll. "We should get some rest. It's still a full day's ride to Silverton." Amelia seemed about to say more, but then simply nodded. "Good night, Archer." "Good night, Amelia." Long after her breathing had deepened into sleep, Archer lay awake, staring at the cabin's rough-hewn ceiling. Tomorrow he would have to tell her about her uncle. Tomorrow everything would change. The thought kept him from sleep, until the first gray light of dawn crept through the cabin window. They departed Thompson's Creek after a hearty breakfast, supplied with fresh provisions from Sam and Martha, and well wishes for their journey. The day was clear and cool, perfect for traveling, and they made good time along the well-established trail to Silverton. Archer found himself uncharacteristically quiet, the weight of his knowledge pressing on him. Amelia noticed his mood, casting occasional concerned glances his way, but she didn't press him for explanations. Instead, she commented on the changing landscape as they traveled, sharing observations that revealed her growing appreciation for the wild beauty around them. By mid-afternoon, they stopped to rest the horses near a viewpoint that offered their first glimpse of Silverton in the valley, below a substantial town by territorial standards, with several streets of buildings, a church steeple rising prominently at one end, and the telltale industrial structures of mining operations visible on the outskirts. "So that's Silverton," Amelia said, shading her eyes against the sun. "It's larger than I expected." Archer nodded. "Silver was discovered in these mountains about 15 years ago. The town grew up around the mines." He hesitated, knowing this was the moment he'd been dreading. "Amelia, there's something I need to tell you before we go any further." The seriousness in his tone made her turn to him, her expression questioning. "What is it?" Archer dismounted, then helped her down from Willow. Leading her to a fallen log overlooking the valley, he gestured for her to sit. "Sam Thompson told me something yesterday that concerns you," he began gently. "It's about your uncle, Edgar." He saw comprehension dawn in her eyes even before he continued, a flicker of dread crossing her face. "No," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Amelia. He passed away 3 weeks ago." "Pneumonia, according to Sam." She stared at him, shock evident in every line of her face. 3 weeks, but that's impossible, his letter. Her voice trailed off as she calculated the dates in her mind. "His letter would have been written before that." Archer nodded. "The mail takes time to reach St. Louis from these parts. He likely wrote to you before he fell ill." Amelia's composure, which had held through stagecoach attacks, rough travel, and physical discomfort, finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes and spilled down her cheeks as the full implication hit her. "I have nowhere to go," she said, her voice barely audible. "No one left at all." Without thinking, Archer reached for her hand, covering it with his own. "That's not entirely true," he said quietly. She looked up, tears still tracking down her face. "What do you mean, my ranch?" he said simply. "It's not much compared to what you're used to, but there's room there. You could stay until you decide what you want to do next." Hope and wariness warred in her expression. "As what?" "Your housekeeper, a charity case, as my guest," Archer replied firmly. "For as long as you need." He hesitated before adding, "The truth is, Amelia, I've grown fond of your company these past days. The thought of simply delivering you to Silverton and riding away never sat right with me, even before I learned about your uncle." A small, watery smile touched her lips. "I've grown fond of your company too." She wiped at her tears with her free hand. "But I can't impose on you indefinitely. I need to find a way to support myself." "Silverton has opportunities," Archer acknowledged. "The hotel might need help, or perhaps the general store, but those decisions don't need to be made today." He squeezed her hand gently. "For now, let's ride into town, confirm what Sam told me, and then decide our next steps." She nodded, visibly pulling herself together. "You're right, one step at a time." They remounted and continued down the trail toward Silverton. As they approached the town's outskirts, the sounds and smells of civilization greeted them, hammering from the blacksmith's forge, the acrid tang of smoke from the assay office's chimneys, voices calling back and forth as the day's business was conducted. Archer led them directly to the church, a white clapboard building with a neat picket fence surrounding its yard. Behind the church, as Sam had indicated, lay the town cemetery. They tethered their horses to the fence and entered the graveyard, moving slowly among the markers until they found what they were looking for, a fresh grave with a simple wooden cross bearing the name Edgar Northcott. Amelia stood silent before it, her posture rigid, her face a mask of controlled grief. Archer remained a respectful distance away, allowing her this private moment with the last of her family. After a time, she rejoined him, her eyes dry but reddened. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said quietly. "At least I know now." "Do you want to visit his home, the assay office?" Archer asked. "We could speak with the local authorities about his affairs." She nodded. "The assay office first, I think. Someone there might know more about his situation." The Silverton assay office occupied a substantial building on the town's main street, its facade more imposing than most of its neighbors. Inside, they found a busy operation with several clerks working behind a long counter and customers waiting to have ore samples evaluated. Archer approached one of the clerks, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Pardon me, we're looking for information about Edgar Northcott." The clerk looked up, his expression immediately changing to one of sympathy when he spotted Amelia. "You must be Miss Northcott," he said. "Your uncle mentioned you were coming from back east. I'm Harold Weber, the chief clerk here. Mr. Northcott was my employer for 8 years. "Then you know he's passed away," Amelia said softly. Weber nodded. "A great loss to our community. Mr. Northcott was well respected in Silverton." He hesitated. "He left some papers for you. If you'll wait a moment, I'll retrieve them from the safe." While Weber was gone, Archer observed the other customers in the office, his old instincts keeping him alert for any sign of trouble. The town seemed peaceful enough, but Jake Harmon and his companions were still out there somewhere. Weber returned with a large envelope, which he handed to Amelia. "Mr. Northcott's personal effects have been stored at his house. The key is inside the envelope, along with some other documents he wanted you to have." "Thank you, Mr. Weber," Amelia replied. Can you direct us to my uncle's house? Of course. It's on Pine Street, just 3 blocks from here. The blue house with white trim and a small front porch. They thanked Weber and left the assay office, both lost in their own thoughts as they walked their horses down Silverton's Main Street. The afternoon was waning, the sun's angle casting long shadows across the dusty thoroughfare. Edgar Northcott's house proved to be a modest but well-maintained dwelling set back from the street behind a small garden. Amelia hesitated at the gate, suddenly overwhelmed by the finality of what she was doing. "Would you like me to wait here?" Archer offered. She shook her head. "No, please come in with me. I don't want to face this alone." The key from the envelope opened the front door, revealing a tidy interior that spoke of simple comfort rather than luxury. Bookshelves lined one wall of the small parlor, filled with volumes on mineralogy, history, and literature. A desk beneath the window held papers neatly stacked, a pen still resting in its holder as if waiting for its owner's return. Amelia moved through the rooms slowly, touching items here and there, building a picture of the uncle she had never really known. In the bedroom, a daguerreotype on the nightstand caught her attention, a family portrait from many years ago showing a younger Edgar, a woman who must have been his wife, and a little girl. "I didn't know he had a family," she said softly, showing the image to Archer. "Perhaps that's something the envelope will explain," he suggested. They returned to the parlor, where Amelia carefully opened the large envelope Weber had given her. Inside were several documents, a will, a letter addressed to her, and a smaller envelope. She read the letter first, her hands trembling slightly. "My dear niece Amelia," it began. "If you are reading this, then I have not lived to welcome you to Silverton as I had hoped. Please know that I was looking forward to meeting you and getting to know the daughter of my beloved brother. Life in these territories can be unpredictable and sometimes harsh, but it has also brought me great joy and purpose." The letter continued, explaining that Edgar had never had children of his own. The little girl in the daguerreotype was his stepdaughter from his wife's previous marriage. Both wife and daughter had died of typhoid nearly a decade earlier. "In my will," the letter concluded, "I have left you everything I possess: this house, my interest in the assay office, and the modest savings in the Silverton Bank. It is not a fortune, but it should allow you to establish yourself here or elsewhere as you choose. My only regret is that I will not be there to see what you make of your new beginning. With affection, your Uncle Edgar." Archer watched the play of emotions across Amelia's face as she finished reading: grief, surprise, and finally a kind of stunned relief. "He left me everything," she said, looking up at him. "A man who never even met me." "Family was important to him," Archer observed. "As it was to you, coming all this way to find him." Amelia opened the will next, confirming what the letter had stated. Edgar Northcott had indeed left his entire estate to his niece, the house, a 20% ownership in the Silverton assay office, and a bank account containing just over $3,000, a substantial sum by frontier standards. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. "Yesterday I was destitute, today I'm a woman of property," Archer finished with a slight smile. "It changes things, doesn't it?" She looked around the comfortable little house, recognition dawning that this was now her home if she wished it to be. "Yes," she agreed, "it changes everything." The smaller envelope contained the deed to the house, banking documents, and a letter of introduction to the other partners in the assay office. As Amelia reviewed these papers, Archer moved to the window, watching the street outside as the light began to fade. "It will be dark soon," he noted. "We should think about arrangements for the night." Amelia looked up, suddenly realizing the implications. "You could stay here," she offered. There's a second bedroom. It would be more comfortable than the hotel. Archer hesitated, considering the propriety of the situation. Are you certain? People might talk. A flash of the spirit he'd come to admire lit her eyes. Let them. You've been my protector and guide for days now. I trust you implicitly. She gestured to the comfortable parlor. Besides, I'm not sure I want to be alone here just yet. Then I accept, he said simply. Thank you. As night fell, they settled into a surprisingly domestic routine. Archer built a fire in the parlor while Amelia explored the kitchen, discovering that her uncle had kept it well stocked with staples. Together they prepared a simple supper, sharing the small table in the kitchen as they discussed the day's revelations. What will you do now? Archer asked as they finished their meal. Will you stay in Silverton? Amelia considered the question carefully. I think I must, at least for a while. I need to understand my uncle's business affairs and decide what to do with my inheritance. She looked at him directly. But your offer to stay at your ranch until I decide it means more to me than I can express. The offer stands, he assured her. Whatever you decide. Later, as they sat before the fire in the parlor, a comfortable silence between them, Archer found himself reluctant to think about leaving. In the short time he'd known her, Amelia Northcott had become important to him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Her courage, her adaptability, her inherent kindness, all these qualities had impressed him deeply. And now she was established in Silverton, with means and a position in the community. She had no need of his protection any longer. You're very quiet, Amelia observed, breaking into his thoughts. Just thinking about tomorrow, he replied. I should check in with the sheriff, see if there's been any word about Harmon and his gang. Will you leave for your ranch afterward? Her voice was carefully neutral, but he detected a note of something else beneath it, regret, perhaps, or simple curiosity. Not right away, he said. I'd like to make sure you're settled here first, introduce you to some people I trust in town. Relief flickered across her features. I'd appreciate that. The following morning brought clear skies and a fresh perspective. After breakfast, they walked together to the sheriff's office, where Archer inquired about recent outlaw activity in the area. Sheriff Collins, a portly man with a bristling mustache and watery blue eyes, seemed less concerned than Archer would have liked. The Blackwater gang operates well north of here, he insisted. We haven't had trouble with them in Silverton proper. They attacked a stagecoach just 3 days' ride from here, Archer pointed out. Miss Northcott was the sole survivor. This information at least captured the sheriff's full attention. Is that so? He peered at Amelia with newfound interest. Could you identify any of them, madam? I only saw them from a distance, Amelia admitted. But one of them, a tall man with a scar on his face, we encountered him later in Clearwater. Jake Harmon, Sheriff Collins nodded. He's wanted in 3 territories. If he's riding with the Blackwater gang now, that's troubling news. He stroked his mustache thoughtfully. I'll send word to the territorial marshal. Not much else I can do with my limited deputies. Outside the sheriff's office, Archer's expression was grim. That went about as well as I expected. Collins is more politician than lawman. You think Harmon and his men might come to Silverton? Amelia asked, concern evident in her voice. It's possible, Archer acknowledged. They seemed mighty interested in you in Clearwater, and if they've been watching the trails. They might know I'm Edgar Northcott's niece, Amelia finished the thought, and that I've inherited his property. Archer nodded. It's something to be cautious about, but Silverton's a proper town, not an isolated cabin. You're safer here than on the trail. They spent the remainder of the day attending to Amelia's affairs, visiting the bank to establish her access to her uncle's account, meeting with the partners of the assay office who welcomed her cordially, and purchasing some necessities to supplement her limited wardrobe. By late afternoon, they had returned to Edgar's house, Amelia's house, now both tired but satisfied with the day's progress. Archer had just built up the fire in the parlor when a knock came at the front door. Exchanging a quick glance with Amelia, he moved to answer it, one hand resting near his holstered revolver. Opening the door, he found a young boy of about 12 standing on the porch, hat in hand. "Message for Mr. Irving," the boy announced importantly. "From Mr. Thompson at the trading post." Archer accepted the folded note, tipped the boy a coin, and closed the door. Opening the message, he read Sam Thompson's hasty scrawl. "Archer Harmon and 5 others passed through this morning, asking questions about you and the lady. Heading toward Silverton. Be on your guard." Sam, Archer handed the note to Amelia, his expression serious. "It seems our concerns were justified." She read it quickly, her face paling slightly. "What do? We prepare," Archer said simply, "and we wait." For the next 2 days, they maintained a careful vigilance. Archer discreetly arranged for a trusted acquaintance in town to watch for Harmon's arrival, while he rarely left Amelia's side. Despite the tension, they fell into an easy domesticity that felt surprisingly natural, sharing meals, discussing books from Edgar's library, planning for Amelia's future in Silverton. On the evening of the second day, as they sat in the parlor after supper, Amelia finally asked the question that had been hovering between them. "When will you return to your ranch?" Archer looked up from the book he'd been reading. "Are you trying to be rid of me, Miss Northcott?" he asked with a slight smile. "Quite the opposite," she replied softly. "I'm trying to prepare myself for when you leave." The simple honesty of her statement caught him off guard. Setting aside his book, he considered his response carefully. "My foreman, Thomas, is capable of handling things for another week or so," he said. "But eventually, yes, I need to return." Amelia nodded, her gaze dropping to her hands folded in her lap. "Of course, you have responsibilities." "Amelia." Something in his voice made her look up. "These past days with you have been unexpected. When I found you in those hills, I never imagined." A commotion in the street outside interrupted him. Raised voices, the sound of horses approaching at a gallop. Archer was on his feet instantly, moving to the window to peer through the curtains. "6 riders," he reported tersely, "and unless I'm mistaken, Jake Harmon's leading them." Amelia rose, her face resolute rather than fearful. "What do they want?" "Nothing good," Archer replied grimly. "Harmon's the type who thinks he's owed whatever he desires." He moved quickly to the gun cabinet in the corner, unlocking it to reveal Edgar Northcott's small collection of firearms. Selecting a shotgun, he checked that it was loaded before handing it to Amelia. "Can you use this if necessary?" She took the weapon with steady hands. "My father taught me." "I'm not an expert, but I understand the basics." Admiration surged through him. "Stay away from the windows. If shooting starts, get down on the floor." Amelia nodded, her expression determined. "Archer, be careful." The riders had stopped in front of the house, their forms dark silhouettes against the twilight sky. Archer positioned himself by the front door, his revolver drawn but held low at his side. When the expected knock came, he called out without opening the door, "State your business." "That you, Irving?" Jake Harmon's voice was unmistakable. "Just looking to have a friendly conversation with Miss Northcott. Heard she's come into some good fortune recently." "Miss Northcott isn't receiving visitors tonight," Archer replied evenly. "I suggest you move along, Harmon." A chuckle from outside. "Now that ain't very hospitable. We've come a long way just to pay our respects." "Last warning," Archer said, his voice hardening. "Ride on or there'll be trouble." A moment of silence, then the sound of boots on the porch steps. "I reckon we're already in trouble, Irving. You're outnumbered 6 to 1. Even a former lawman like yourself can't like those odds." Archer tensed at the revelation that Harmon knew his background. "Sheriff Collins knows you're in town, Harmon. So do a dozen other people. You start something here. There's no riding away clean." Another pause. Archer could almost hear Harmon calculating his options. "Tell you what," Harmon finally said. "The lady inherited a tidy sum from what we hear. $3,000 would set a man up nice in Mexico. You tell her we want that money by noon tomorrow, delivered to the old Jensen mine north of town. She does that, we disappear for good. She doesn't." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. "I'll convey your message," Archer replied neutrally. "Now get off this property." The sound of retreating footsteps was followed by the creak of saddle leather and the clop of hooves as the riders moved away. Archer waited until they were well down the street before securing the door and returning to the parlor. Amelia stood where he'd left her, the shotgun still gripped in her hands. "You heard?" he asked unnecessarily. She nodded, her expression calm but resolute. "They want my inheritance." "Yes." Archer holstered his revolver. "But they're not going to get it. What will we do?" Archer considered their options. "We could alert Sheriff Collins, but I doubt he'd take effective action. We could try to wait them out, but Harmon's not the patient type. Or," Amelia prompted, sensing there was more, "or we could set a trap," Archer said slowly. "Make them think they're getting what they want, then turn the tables." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "Use me as bait, you mean?" "Not exactly," Archer corrected. "We'd make it appear you're complying with their demands, but in reality I'd be waiting for them." "That sounds dangerous," Amelia observed. "For you primarily." "It is," he acknowledged, "but I've faced worse odds." She studied him for a long moment before setting the shotgun aside and moving to stand directly before him. "Why are you doing this, Archer? You could have left me in Silverton days ago, your duty discharged. Instead, you've remained, placing yourself in danger for my sake." The question hung between them, demanding an honest answer. Archer looked into her eyes, seeing not just fear or gratitude there, but something deeper, a connection that had grown between them day by day, mile by mile. "Because somewhere between finding you in those hills and standing here now, you became important to me," he said simply. "More important than I expected or intended." Amelia's expression softened. "And you to me." She reached up, her hand gently touching his cheek. "Which is why I can't let you risk your life alone. Whatever plan we make together." Archer covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press a kiss to her palm. "Together, then," he agreed softly. They spent the next hour outlining a plan not perfect, but better than waiting passively for Harmon to make his move. By the time they retired to their separate rooms, both were exhausted but resolute. In the quiet darkness of the guest room, Archer lay awake, his mind cycling through contingencies and potential problems with their strategy. So much could go wrong, and the stakes were impossibly high. Not just Amelia's inheritance, but her safety, her life. A soft knock at his door broke into his thoughts. "Archer," Amelia's voice came quietly through the wood. "Are you awake?" He rose, opening the door to find her standing in the hallway, a shawl wrapped around her nightdress, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Is something wrong?" he asked, suddenly alert. She shook her head. "No, I couldn't sleep." She hesitated. "May I come in?" Archer stepped back, allowing her to enter the small room lit only by moonlight filtering through the curtains. She moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. "I've been thinking about what happens after tomorrow," she said without turning. "Assuming our plan works and Harmon is no longer a threat." "What about it?" Archer asked, remaining near the door, acutely aware of the impropriety of her presence in his room despite the circumstances. You'll return to your ranch, she continued. And I'll stay here in Silverton, managing my uncle's affairs. Now she turned to face him, and we may never see each other again. The thought hit him with unexpected force. That doesn't have to be the case, he said carefully. Silverton's not so far from my ranch I could visit. As what? A friend, an occasional caller. Amelia took a step toward him. Archer, I'm not naive about the ways of the world. I know what people will say if a single man visits a single woman too frequently. Let them talk, he replied, echoing her words from days earlier, another step closer. Is that what you want? To call on me from time to time to maintain a proper friendship within the bounds of social convention? Archer felt his pulse quicken. What do you want, Amelia? I want what I've never had before, she said simply. A life that's real and true with a man who sees me as I am, not as society expects me to be. She was directly before him now, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, even in the dim light. I want you, Archer Irving, however impossible or impractical that might be. For a moment he couldn't speak, overwhelmed by her directness and the echo of his own unspoken feelings in her words. It's not impossible, he finally managed. Impractical, perhaps. My ranch is remote, the work never ending. It's not the life you've known. No, she agreed. It's better. It's real. She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. These past days with you have shown me what's possible, a partnership of equals, facing whatever comes together. Archer drew her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. Are you certain? This isn't just gratitude or fear speaking. I'm certain, she replied steadily. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. When he kissed her, it felt like the culmination of a journey neither had planned but both had somehow been traveling toward all along. Her lips were soft beneath his, yielding yet demanding, and when she pressed herself against him, her arms encircling his neck, Archer knew with absolute clarity that he never wanted to let her go. If we survive tomorrow, he murmured against her lips, will you come with me to my ranch? Not as my guest, but as my wife. Amelia drew back slightly, searching his face in the moonlight. Are you asking me to marry you, Archer Irving? Impulsively and improperly, yes, he admitted with a small smile. Though I'd planned a more traditional proposal after Harmon was dealt with. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I will marry you and go with you to your ranch and build a life there together. He kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring all his hopes and fears and newfound love into the embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Archer rested his forehead against hers. You should return to your room, he said reluctantly. Tomorrow will come early and we need clear heads. Amelia nodded, though she made no move to leave his arms. Promise me you'll be careful tomorrow. I've lost everyone else I've ever loved. I couldn't bear to lose you too. I promise, he replied solemnly. We'll face whatever comes together. Dawn broke clear and cold over Silverton, the first rays of sunlight gilding the mountains that framed the mining town. Archer and Amelia prepared for the day in a companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but drawing strength from the other's presence. Their plan was simple in concept, though fraught with potential complications. Amelia would ride to the abandoned Jensen mine as instructed, carrying a saddlebag that appeared to contain her inheritance. Archer would travel ahead, using a different route to reach the mine first, positioning himself to observe and intervene when Harmon and his men arrived. As they prepared to leave the house separately, Archer took Amelia's hands in his. Remember, if anything seems wrong, if Harmon brings more men than we're expecting, you ride straight back to town. Don't try to be brave. The same goes for you, she replied, squeezing his hands. No heroics. If it can't be done safely, we'll find another way. He kissed her quickly but thoroughly. "I'll see you soon." Archer left first, riding Renegade out the back way and circling around the outskirts of town to approach the Jensen mine from the west. The abandoned mine was tucked into a rocky hillside about 2 miles north of Silverton, close enough to town to be visible, but far enough away that any disturbance there wouldn't immediately draw attention. The main shaft entrance was partially collapsed, but several outbuildings remained intact, if weathered by years of neglect. Archer secured Renegade in a stand of pine trees well out of sight, then made his way stealthily to a position overlooking the clearing in front of the main building, the most likely spot for the exchange to occur. An hour passed, then another. The sun climbed higher in the sky, approaching the noon meeting time. Archer maintained his vigil patiently, scanning the surrounding terrain for any sign of movement. Eventually, he spotted what he was waiting for: Harmon and his men, 6 riders approaching from the north, keeping to the cover of the trees until the last possible moment. They dismounted in the clearing, Harmon directing 2 of his men to take up positions behind the main building while the others remained with him in plain sight. A classic ambush formation, just as Archer had anticipated. Minutes later, Amelia appeared on the trail from town, riding Willow at a steady pace, a saddlebag clearly visible across the mare's haunches. She sat tall in the saddle, her posture betraying no fear despite the dangerous situation. As she entered the clearing, Harmon stepped forward, a wolfish smile on his scarred face. "Miss Northcott," he called. "Right on time. I appreciate punctuality in a business arrangement." Amelia reined Willow to a stop several yards from the outlaws. "I have what you asked for," she replied, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. $3,000 in exchange for being left in peace." "Let's see it," Harmon demanded, gesturing for her to dismount. Archer tensed, watching the scene unfold exactly as they had planned. Now came the critical moment. Amelia swung down from the saddle, untying the saddlebag and holding it before her. "I want your word that once you have this money, you'll leave Silverton and never return." Harmon's laugh held no humor. "You're hardly in a position to make demands, lady." "But sure, you have my word for what it's worth." As he reached for the saddlebag, Amelia took a deliberate step backward. "I'd like all of your men where I can see them," she said clearly, the signal they had arranged. Archer didn't hesitate. From his elevated position, he fired a single shot that struck the ground directly in front of Harmon, causing the outlaw to jump back in surprise. "The next one won't miss, Harmon," Archer called, making his position known. "Tell your men to drop their weapons." Confusion erupted in the clearing. The 2 men hidden behind the building emerged, guns drawn but uncertain where to aim. Harmon cursed violently, his hand moving toward his holster. "I wouldn't," Amelia advised calmly, and only then did Harmon notice that she had produced a small derringer from the folds of her riding skirt, aimed steadily at his chest. "You're making a mistake," Harmon snarled. "There are 6 of us and only 2 of you." "3, actually," came a new voice, and Sheriff Collins emerged from the trees to the east, rifle raised. Behind him, 4 deputies spread out, covering the outlaws from multiple angles. "Drop your weapons, gentlemen. This little charade is over." For a tense moment, it seemed Harmon might choose violence over surrender. But as his gaze darted around the clearing, assessing the hopelessness of his position, his shoulders slumped in defeat. With a curse, he unbuckled his gun belt and let it fall to the ground. His men, taking their cue from their leader, similarly disarmed. The deputies moved in swiftly, securing the outlaws with handcuffs and collecting their weapons. Sheriff Collins approached Amelia, tipping his hat respectfully. "Well played, Miss Northcott. Mr. Irving's plan worked perfectly. Archer descended from his position, holstering his revolver as he joined them. "I'm surprised you agreed to help, Sheriff. You didn't seem overly concerned yesterday." Collins shrugged. "Let's just say I received a strongly worded telegram from the territorial marshal this morning, inquiring why I hadn't apprehended Jake Harmon yet." He glanced at the captured outlaws. "This should improve my standing considerably." As the deputies led Harmon and his men away, Archer turned to Amelia. "You were magnificent," he said softly. "Though I aged 10 years watching you face him down." "I knew you were watching over me," she replied with a smile, "as you have since the moment we met." Sheriff Collins cleared his throat awkwardly. "If you folks don't mind, we should head back to town. There'll be paperwork to complete about this incident." The return to Silverton was almost anticlimactic after the tension of the confrontation. Citizens lined the streets to watch as the notorious outlaws were marched to the jail, and more than a few nodded respectfully to Archer and Amelia as they rode past. At the sheriff's office, they provided formal statements about the stagecoach attack and subsequent events. When they finally emerged into the late afternoon sunlight, the town had returned to its normal routines, the excitement of the morning already fading into the next piece of frontier gossip. "What now?" Amelia asked as they walked their horses toward her house. Archer considered the question. "Now, I believe, we have a future to discuss. Unless you've reconsidered your answer from last night." "Not for a moment," she assured him, her eyes bright with certainty. "Though I admit our courtship has been rather unconventional." "Nothing about our meeting has been conventional," Archer pointed out with a smile. "Why start now?" At the house, they tended to the horses before settling in the parlor, the familiar space now holding new significance as they contemplated the changes ahead. "I should return to my ranch soon," Archer said, taking her hand in his. "There's much to prepare if you're to join me there." "How soon?" Amelia asked, a practical note in her voice. "I have affairs to arrange here as well the house, my uncle's interest in the assay office." "A week, perhaps 2, he suggested. "Time enough for you to settle your business and for me to make the ranch house more suitable for a lady's presence." Amelia's laugh was warm. "I'm not so delicate as all that, Archer, but I appreciate the thought." She grew more serious. "What of marriage? Should we wait until these matters are arranged, or—" "I'd marry you tomorrow if you're willing," he replied honestly. "But perhaps a small delay would be wise, allowing us to do things properly." "Properly," she repeated with a smile. "Very well. 2 weeks then. I'll settle my affairs here, you'll prepare your ranch, and then we'll be married before I accompany you home." Home. The word resonated between them, full of promise and possibility. "There's something else we should discuss," Archer said after a moment. "Your inheritance." "It's substantial, Amelia. If we marry, by law it becomes mine to control." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You're concerned I might think you're marrying me for my uncle's money." "No," he corrected gently. "I'm concerned that you should retain control of what's rightfully yours. I have no interest in your inheritance, except that it provides you with independence and security." Touched by his consideration, Amelia leaned forward to kiss him softly. "Then we shall find a way to ensure that happens. Perhaps Mr. Weber at the assay office can recommend a lawyer who could draw up the necessary documents." They spent the evening planning their future together, practical details of Amelia's move to the ranch, improvements Archer wanted to make to the property, and longer-term dreams of expanding both the cattle operation and their eventual family. As darkness fell, Archer reluctantly rose to leave. "I should check in at the hotel," he said. "Now that the threat from Harmon is resolved, it's not appropriate for me to remain here." Amelia nodded, understanding the necessity even as she regretted it. "Propriety at last," she said with a small smile, "though it seems rather late for that." 2 weeks isn't so very long, he reminded her, drawing her into his arms for a lingering kiss. "And then we'll have a lifetime together." The following days passed in a flurry of activity for both of them. Archer met with the territorial marshal, providing detailed information about the Blackwater gang's operations that would lead to the capture of several more of its members. He also spent time with Sam and Martha Thompson, who were delighted by the news of his impending marriage and promised to attend the ceremony. Amelia, meanwhile, worked with Harold Weber to understand her uncle's business interests, and with a reputable lawyer to arrange for her inheritance to remain under her control, even after marriage, an unusual arrangement, but one that the lawyer agreed was achievable with the proper documentation. She also made decisions about Edgar's house, ultimately choosing to sell it to a young doctor newly arrived in Silverton who was eager to establish a practice and a home. The proceeds from the sale would be invested in improvements to Archer's ranch, a compromise that satisfied both her practical nature and her desire to contribute to their shared future. 10 days after the confrontation with Harmon, Archer and Amelia stood together in Silverton's small church, exchanging vows before Reverend Matthews and a small gathering of witnesses: Sam and Martha Thompson, Harold Weber and his wife, and a few of Archer's acquaintances from his marshalling days. Amelia wore a simple but elegant dress of ivory silk, purchased from Silverton's finest dressmaker, while Archer cut a handsome figure in a new black suit, his normally windswept hair tamed for the occasion. "I, Archer, take thee, Amelia, to be my wedded wife," he spoke clearly, his eyes never leaving hers. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." When Amelia repeated the vows, her voice was steady and sure, filled with the same certainty that had carried her through all the changes and challenges of recent weeks. "By the power vested in me," Reverend Matthews concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Archer's kiss was gentle yet profound, a promise of all they would build together in the years to come. As they turned to face their small audience, now applauding and offering congratulations, Amelia felt a sense of rightness that transcended all the uncertainty and danger that had marked their meeting. From the church, they proceeded to the hotel dining room where a modest reception had been arranged. There was cake and champagne, toasts and well wishes, laughter and a few happy tears from Martha Thompson, who declared repeatedly that she'd known from the moment she saw them together that they were meant for each other. As the celebration continued around them, Archer drew Amelia aside for a moment of privacy. "Happy, Mrs. Irving?" he asked softly. "Completely," she assured him, her eyes bright with joy, "though I can hardly believe how much my life has changed in so short a time. From destitution to marriage, from fear to such happiness, it seems almost dreamlike." "If it's a dream, then we're sharing it," Archer replied, his hand warm against the small of her back, "and I have no desire to wake." The following morning, they departed Silverton with little fanfare, Amelia riding Willow, Archer on Renegade, and a pack-horse carrying Amelia's trunk, and the few possessions she'd chosen to bring from her uncle's house. The journey to Archer's ranch would take 2 days, following a trail that wound through some of the most beautiful country in the territory. As they crested the first rise outside of town, Amelia reined Willow to a stop, looking back at Silverton spread below them in the morning light. "Having second thoughts?" Archer asked, guiding Renegade alongside her. She shook her head. Not at all, just saying goodbye to one chapter and greeting the next. She turned to him with a smile. Lead on, husband, show me our home. The trail took them through verdant valleys and alongside clear running streams, past stands of aspen that shimmered in the breeze and pine forests that filled the air with their clean, sharp scent. They camped that night beside a mountain lake, building a small fire and spreading their bedrolls side by side beneath a sky brilliant with stars. Making love under that vast canopy felt like a completion of all that had begun when Archer first found Amelia alone in the hills, frightened but defiant. Each touch, each whispered endearment, deepened the connection between them, transforming two separate journeys into a shared path forward. Later, wrapped in blankets and each other's arms, they watched shooting stars trace ephemeral patterns across the darkness. I've been thinking, Archer said, his voice a rumble against Amelia's cheek where it rested on his chest. About what you said that first night we met, that you were aware of your circumstances. I remember, she murmured sleepily. You've never been a victim, Amelia, even when you were in genuine danger. That's one of the things I admire most about you. His arms tightened around her. You face whatever comes with clear eyes and a brave heart. She smiled against his skin. A quality we share, I think. The second day of travel brought them into increasingly familiar territory for Archer, who pointed out landmarks with growing animation as they neared his property, now their property. That ridge marks the northern boundary, he explained, indicating a distinctive line of hills. Silver Creek runs through the heart of the ranch, providing water year-round, and just beyond that stand of cottonwoods is the house. When they finally rode into the clearing where the ranch house stood, Amelia's first impression was of solid comfort rather than grandeur. The house was built of hewn logs and river stone, with a broad porch wrapping around two sides and windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Nearby stood a barn and several outbuildings, all well-maintained if not new. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, tall and lean, with graying hair and a weathered face that broke into a wide smile at the sight of them. Thought I heard riders, he called, striding forward to greet them. Welcome home, boss, and this must be the bride Sam Thompson wrote about. Thomas, meet my wife, Amelia, Archer said, helping her dismount. Amelia, this is Thomas Jenkins, the best foreman in the territory and the man who's kept this place running while I've been gone. Thomas removed his hat, nodding respectfully to Amelia. Madam, it's a pleasure to meet you. We're all mighty glad Archer's finally found himself a partner worthy of him. Thank you, Thomas, Amelia replied warmly. I look forward to getting to know you and learning about the ranch. With Thomas's help, they unsaddled the horses and brought Amelia's trunk into the house. Inside, Amelia discovered that Archer had been busy during his brief return to the ranch. Before their wedding, the main room had been thoroughly cleaned. New curtains hung at the windows, and a beautiful quilt spread across the bed in the bedroom. Martha Thompson's handiwork, Archer explained, seeing her admiring the quilt. She sent it with Sam as a wedding gift. Once Thomas had departed for his own cabin further down the creek, Archer gave Amelia a proper tour of the house, simple but well built, with the main room serving as both parlor and dining area, a bedroom, a small study filled with books and maps, and a functional kitchen with a modern cook stove. It's not what you're used to, he acknowledged as they stood in the main room, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. It's perfect, Amelia replied sincerely, moving to stand in the circle of his arms. It's our home, Archer, the beginning of our life together. As twilight settled over the ranch, they stood together on the porch, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. In the distance, cattle lowed softly in the home pasture, and somewhere an owl called, its haunting cry echoing across the peaceful landscape. "I never expected any of this," Archer said quietly, his arm around Amelia's waist. "When I found you in those hills, I was just doing what anyone would do, offering help to someone in need. And saying I'd be safe, that you'd guard me through the night," Amelia reminded him with a smile. "A promise you've kept faithfully ever since." "And always will," he assured her, turning her to face him. In the gathering darkness, his features were softened, his eyes reflecting the last light in the western sky. "Welcome home, Amelia Irving." Their kiss sealed the promise of all that lay ahead: challenges and joys, work and rest. The building of a life that neither could have imagined alone, but that both now embraced together. From a chance encounter in the wild hills to a love that would sustain them through all the seasons to come, their story was just beginning. And as night settled fully over the Silver Creek Ranch, the stars watched over them, no longer strangers finding their way, but partners, equals, husband and wife, home at last in each other's arms.